Johnson family had always been a happy, tight-knit bunch, living in their quaint suburban home with their beloved black Labrador, Shadow. He was more than just a pet. He was a cherished member of the family, loved by all. However, their world turned upside down one stormy night when Shadow, frightened by the thunder and lightning, bolted out of the yard and disappeared into the night. The family was devastated, their home suddenly feeling empty and incomplete without their furry companion. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, but there was no sign of Shadow. The Johnsons put up flyers, contacted animal shelters, and did everything they could to find him, but it was as if he had vanished into thin air. As the one-year anniversary of Shadow's disappearance approached, the family had nearly given up hope, resigned to the fact that they would never see their beloved pet again. That was until one day, out of the blue, Shadow returned. He was standing at the front door, his fur dirty and matted, but it was undoubtedly him. The family was overjoyed, their hearts swelling with happiness as they welcomed Shadow back into their home with open arms. However, as the days went by, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about Shadow. He was more aloof, his once sparkling eyes now dull and lifeless. He would spend hours staring into space, and at night, they could hear him growling and snarling in his sleep. Concerned, the Johnsons took Shadow to the vet, hoping to get some answers. The vet was baffled, unable to find anything physically wrong with him. He suggested that perhaps Shadow was just traumatized from his time away and needed time to adjust. But as the weeks went by, Shadow's behavior became more and more erratic. He would snap at the family, his growls deep and guttural, unlike anything they had ever heard from him before. Terrified, the Johnsons reached out to an animal behaviorist, desperate to find a way to help Shadow. The behaviorist was intrigued, having never encountered a case like this before. She agreed to take Shadow in for observation, hoping to get to the bottom of his strange behavior. As she spent time with Shadow, she noticed that he seemed to be in a constant state of agitation, as if he was battling some inner demon. She conducted various tests and experiments, but she was left with more questions than answers. One night, as she was reviewing her notes, she stumbled upon a local legend about a demonic entity that was said to inhabit the area. According to the legend, the entity would possess animals, turning them into its minions. Chilled to the bone, the behaviorist couldn't shake the feeling that Shadow's case was somehow connected to the legend. She decided to dig deeper, delving into ancient texts and consulting with experts on demonic possession. Her research led her to a ritual that could potentially expel the demonic entity from Shadow's body, freeing him from its grasp. Knowing it was a long shot, she decided to give it a try, desperate to save the once loving Labrador. As she performed the ritual, Shadow's behavior became even more erratic, his growls turning into blood-curdling screams. The air grew heavy, and the room seemed to vibrate with an unseen energy. Just when it seemed like the ritual was working, Shadow's body went limp, collapsing onto the floor. The behaviorist checked his vitals, relieved to find that he was still alive. However, as she looked into his eyes, she realized that the demonic entity was not gone. It had merely transferred hosts. Now she was the one possessed, her body convulsing as the entity took control. Horrified, she realized that she had underestimated the entity's power, and now it was too late. The entity, now free from Shadow's body, had a new vessel, and it was hungry for revenge. The behaviorist's last moments were filled with agony and terror as the entity tore her apart from the inside, leaving nothing but a lifeless husk. Back at the Johnson household, Shadow returned, his behavior back to normal, as if nothing had ever happened. The family was overjoyed, grateful to have their loving pet back. The Johnson family, blissfully unaware of the horrific events that transpired in the behaviorist's office, settled back into their routine, grateful to have Shadow back. The children played with him in the backyard, and life seemed to return to normal. However, there was an underlying tension, a palpable sense of unease that lingered in the air. The parents couldn't shake the feeling that something was not quite right, but they pushed those thoughts aside, attributing them to the stress of the past year. Days turned into weeks, and the strange incidents that had plagued Shadow's return seemed to dissipate. The family started to let their guard down, convinced that whatever had troubled their beloved pet was now in the past. But as the weeks went by, the town began to experience a series of bizarre and unexplainable events. Animals were found mutilated, their bodies twisted and contorted in unnatural ways. Whispers of a dark presence spread through the community, fueling a sense of fear and paranoia. The Johnsons, though concerned, remained skeptical, refusing to believe that these events had anything to do with Shadow. They were determined to hold on to their renewed sense of happiness, unwilling to let anything disrupt their lives again. However, as the strange occurrences continued, the family couldn't ignore them any longer. They began to notice a shift in Shadow's behavior once again. He would disappear for hours on end, returning home with his fur matted and bloodied. Terrified, the parents decided to take matters into their own hands. They reached out to a local paranormal investigator, desperate to get to the bottom of the strange happenings in their town. The investigator, a seasoned professional with a knack for dealing with the supernatural, was intrigued by the Johnsons' story. He agreed to help, conducting a series of investigations and experiments to uncover the truth. As he delved deeper into the case, he discovered a chilling connection between the mutilated animals and Shadow. It seemed as though the demonic entity had not left. It had merely gone dormant, biding its time until it could strike again. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the investigator decided to perform a second exorcism, this time determined to banish the entity once and for all. As he began the ritual, the air grew heavy, and the room vibrated with an unseen energy. Shadow's body convulsed, his growls turning into guttural screams as the entity fought back, unwilling to be expelled. But unlike the behaviorist, the investigator was prepared. He had studied the entity, learning its weaknesses and vulnerabilities. With unwavering determination, he continued the ritual, his voice steady as he recited the ancient incantations. Just when it seemed like the entity was about to overpower him, there was a sudden burst of light, and the room fell silent. Shadow's body went limp, collapsing onto the floor. The investigator, exhausted but relieved, checked Shadow's vitals, finding him to be alive and well. The demonic presence was gone, expelled from his body once and for all. The Johnson family, overwhelmed with gratitude, thanked the investigator, their hearts full of joy as they embraced Shadow, their beloved pet finally free from the demonic entity's grasp. As the story comes to a close, the family settles back into their routine, grateful for the peace and tranquility that has returned to their lives. Shadow is back to his old self, playful and loving, and the strange occurrences in the town cease. However, as the final words are read, a chilling detail is revealed. The entity, though expelled from Shadow's body, was not destroyed. It was merely displaced, biding its time until it could find a new host. And as the screen fades to black, a haunting whisper fills the air, and the listener is left to wonder if the entity has found its next victim, leaving the story with an open, shocking ending that lingers long.